Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll get started. First, thank you for joining us at our Green Building Professional Seminar Series today, which will focus on the solar industry and solar market in Washington, D.C. Our event is called Here Comes the Sun, the road to 10% local solar generation and 100% renewable electricity. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Jamie Donovan with the Department of Energy and Environment, and I'm here with my colleague, Jen Culp, and our five panelists today. And I'll let them introduce themselves in their presentation because they can do a better job than I can. Just a few quick notes on housekeeping. You should be muted. And I would encourage you during the presentations, we'll go through all four presentations and then we'll have a question and answer. But I encourage you as the audience to engage in the chat box during the presentations and afterwards. And then during the question and answer, you can use the chat box. If you want, you can unmute yourself and participate. It's always good to hear your voice. So that option is up to you. I also want to thank my agency, of course, for the support, but also DCRA, the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, who started this event series a few years ago and have been gracious enough to partner with us this year as we look at the Clean Energy DC Act. Also, Director Wells at DOE and the Mayor's Office for all their support on this event, but also on Clean Energy DC stuff in general. So thank you. As I just mentioned, this year, the Green Building Professional Seminar Series is looking at the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Act, which was passed in 2019 and is really a historic bill that advances clean energy and greenhouse gas reductions for the city of Washington, DC. It addresses renewable energy, building energy efficiency, transportation and electric vehicles, low-income programs. So it really does a lot. And this series is broken up to look at different portions of the Act. And today we are looking at the renewable energy and renewable portfolio standard portion. So when the Act was passed, and as I think it was early 2019, it established the country's most ambitious renewable portfolio standard. I think that may have been surpassed now because there's a lot of competition among states and cities, but it was a really important bill for us. And the previous renewable portfolio standard was 50% renewable electricity by 2032. This doubled that to 100% renewable electricity. It also increased the solar carve out, or the portion that will come from local solar. So in about 10 years, 5% of our electricity should come from local solar, and double that amount, 10% in 20 years. So not as someone who didn't come from the solar industry, 5% didn't seem like a big number to me. Turns out it's a big number, and 10% is even bigger number. And so it's not easy to get there because space in DC is a hot commodity. And even if it's on a roof, you have a lot of things to compete with: mechanical equipment on buildings, green roofs, event space, or if it's a residential neighborhood, maybe your roof's not pointing the right direction, or you have big trees. So it is a big challenge, and we'll be looking today at the different scenarios that could help us get there. We'll also be hearing about what the city's been doing to scale up its renewable electricity, particularly for our low-income communities, and ensuring that everyone in DC gets to benefit from solar with lower energy bills and jobs and just a cleaner environment. And then we'll be hearing, if you're a resident or a business and you're thinking about this, what should you be thinking? What resources are out there for you? So we have a full panel. We have 4 different presentations, and It'll start off with Emil King, who's one of my colleagues and just worked on a great project he'll talk about. Yesenia Rivera with DC Sun, um, who's worked a lot in DC and knows the solar industry well. Um, Aaron Camp and Ben Havamaki from Synats Energy Economics. Hopefully, I'm getting all those right. And Jay Laurie from the DC Green Bank to talk about some of the work they're doing. So, with that, let me turn it over to Emil to talk about his most recent project and also let you know we're being recorded. I forgot to mention that. So this will be posted on our website, but if you don't want to be recorded, you may want to leave now. Thanks.
All right, so thanks, Jamie, for the introduction. Again, my name is Emil King. I'm an analyst at DOE working on solar policy and programs. I've been working on solar issues since about 2005. So I remember when this was a very nascent industry and very happy to see what's happened in the past few years. I'm also the project manager for this initiative. So I'm happy to be sharing a little bit of background for you today on community solar at Oxen Run. It's an extremely unique project bordering Oxen Run in the southeast southwest corner of the district, and it recently came online. Next. So a quick project overview. A community solar Oxen Run is the largest clean energy project in the district that's focused specifically on serving low-income neighborhood residents through DOE's Solar for All program, which I'll talk a bit more about. There are about 750 households, actually a little more than that. They'll be served via $500 a year billing credits. It's an adaptive reuse of a contaminated district administered site, um, which is an extremely important piece. And then there's some system specs that I'll come back to in a bit. But we spent about $5.5 million on this project. It was a great partnership between DOE, Department of General Services, which is the district's property manager, Lightbox, which did some pre-development and management support on this project, NEO, which designed the system, smaller solar company in DC, as well as Grid Alternatives Mid-Atlantic, which was responsible for construction. Great nonprofit out there doing job training. Next. So, why are we doing this? The impetus for the majority of our agency's current solar work revolves around the Solar for All program. So, Solar for All aims to bring the benefits of solar energy to 100,000 low to moderate income households in the District of Columbia. So, over the few years, we've partnered with a number of organizations to bring solar directly to single family homes, as well as develop a range of community solar projects to benefit renters and residents in multifamily buildings. Solar for All participants should expect to see a 50% savings on their electricity bill over 15 to 25 years under a range of scenarios, and can be really proud to have gone solar. Um, Quick background on that program. It was established by the RPS Expansion Amendment Act in 2016. Um, it increased the amount of solar energy generated in the district and specifically is aimed at bringing those benefits to seniors, small local businesses, nonprofits, and low-income households, which was previously a group that had not experienced any of the benefits of solar really in the District of Columbia. It's funded by the Renewable Energy Development Fund, or REDF, which is an RPS term of compliance payment. So basically, when energy suppliers cannot meet their renewable energy requirements that are established by the RPS, then they have to pay a fee. That fee comes to DOE, and we in turn develop more solar projects. Lastly, Solar for All was developed in partnership with a stakeholder task force that informed the development of the implementation plan, and then we also had a task force for the Oxen Run project specifically. Next. So backing up, what is community solar? Well, it's basically a billing uh, arrangement with the local distribution utility, which is PEPCO, and it allows renters, homeowners, businesses, or other organizations to save on their electricity bills, even if they don't have a roof to install solar. So Jamie mentioned space in the district is there's not a lot of it. We have geographic constraints, and so not everyone can have solar. There may be roof shedding issues, age of roofs, etc. So community solar allows everyone to participate. Subscribers receive benefits from systems located anywhere in DC, and this is enabled by what we call community renewable energy facilities, or CREFs. Next. So, in order to kind of jumpstart this market, this project started in about 2017. It was just recently completed. So I'm not sure how well we were able to get that going, but we did, I think, solve a lot of the issues that a lot of community solar projects have faced in the last few years. So essentially, here's an aerial view of the site. If you're not familiar, this is the border of the district and Maryland, southeast southwest on South Capitol Street. It's bordering two streams. Oxon run to the left, Barnaby run to the right, the bottom right where the label is. The district manages this site, but it's federally owned. And then we had to do quite a few things before we actually built anything. So here we had the team had to deal with a property that had decades of neglect. Historically, the site has been used as government storage, a maintenance facility, as an illegal dump for any and everybody. Habitat was trampled and destroyed, and there were other improper uses of the site. It's about 15 and a half acres. There were underground storage tanks from gas stations that leaked into the soil, and a variety of trash mounds, maybe 10 or 15 feet tall, lots of rotten logs from that were removed from various locations throughout the city, vehicle maintenance fluids, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a pretty bad location. Cannot really be used for anything else other than a park, according to federal requirements. And so we had to be a little creative in what we did, and we decided a solar farm would be the best use for this site. Next. So quickly, project design goals. So obviously, something that's this new, this large, and this long lasting needs a lot of thoughtful consideration about how it's going to look and how it's going to be maintained over the 30, 40-year lifespan of this site. So we wanted an effective solar generation facility, but also to have minimal aesthetic disturbance to the site. It's basically always been an open field behind a fence. We didn't want to change that too much. So with that, the team had a couple of design goals. One is landscape integration, make it unobtrusive, have a light touch on the land, and the project should be minimally invasive, having an elevation that's not really a thing when you view it from the street. Secondarily, we wanted to beautify the site and rehabilitate the habitat that was degraded or lost. So looking at additional vegetative buffers along the fence and the sidewalks, just to make it, a nice location for people to see, or basically not pay attention to at all once it kind of blends in. Next. So then what do? You build it. Well, not really. Quite a lot goes into dealing with a site like this. The pre-development included assessing and designing for these somewhat difficult site conditions to determine if this was even a feasible project. Then we had to get the community on board. So as I mentioned, it's federally owned by the National Park Service. There are a range of other approvals that the district had to get first before we could do anything. It's located in a 100-year floodplain. So the system was designed to withstand potential inundation by floodwater. The underground soil contamination that I mentioned, we had to do additional testing to ensure that the petroleum residues weren't migrating. They were not. They're best left in place. And that's the kind of safest best practice for this type of site. It borders two streams. There's some wetlands to be avoided. There's a lot of illegal dumping and loitering. Had to clean it up, basically. So what does all that mean? It means going to the community and telling them all of this apologizing for what the government has done under our kind of administration, and then promising to improve site conditions and having it be a beneficial asset to the community. Um, Dealing with that, there's a lot of, historic misuse of the property. People are a little weary about the government coming in and doing something like this. Concerns about gentrification and environmental justice. So the ANC had to get on board. That required about 15 months of constituent education regarding the site itself, solar energy, solar farms, solar for all, and kind of everything in between. And finally, there's the zoning approval, um, which requires some zoning amendments and updates for these types of sites to ensure that if other big solar farms are built in the future, that they kind of incorporate best practices. Um, then we actually went into the construction. Lots of trash removed, lots of trees that were rotten and had to be mulched. Uh, Grading of the site, general site prep, driving piles, assembling the racks, then finally doing the electrical work, then getting the utility to tie all that in. So we had some issues there as well. So those we worked with, and hopefully our challenges help other solar developers in the city going forward. Next. So an aerial rendering of the site, again, about 15 and a half acres, three separate arrays. Um, Next. And here we are. So there are about 850 I-beams driven about 18 feet into the soil, 286 racks where 70, almost 7,300 360 watt solar modules are mounted with 12 utility scale inverters. Again, it was recently interconnected in December and is just coming online a couple weeks ago. So very excited and happy to be producing electricity for at least 25 years. That's the warranty period of the equipment. Safe, clean, and silent. Next. So what does all of this mean for the community, which is who we're doing all this for? Again, over 750 households will receive utility benefits for between 15 and 25 years. Those are just beginning now. We're actually looking at about 780 households with our updated approach to those allocations. There are a lot of job training requirements for this project, and we're very happy to have had local input and local employment. There's also a job training opportunity through the SolarWorks DC program, which our agency administers as a partnership with the Department of Employment Services as well as Grid Alternatives. So they Grid constructed the project as well as had uh, trainees in their solar job training program participate in that installation. So that's obviously a wonderful thing. The clear health impacts or reducing air pollution, as we all know. I think solar is a clean energy and um, reduces asthma. The community has very high incidences of asthma. Anything we can do to reduce fossil fuel use is also a great thing. And lastly, there's the beautification, wildlife habitat, and education opportunities. So currently, we're moving into a phase of installing landscaping enhancements, native trees and shrubs, um, native pollinator restorations, looking at the plants that are there now, how we can expand those habitats, adding pollinator meadows for native bees and birds, etc. And then lastly, exploring opportunities to have some beehives and beekeeping educational programming on site. Next. Um, so wrapping up, as far as outreach, this project is about 81% subscribed. Again, with the goal of 780 households to be served ultimately. Um, there are many, many more single family and community solar projects that are being built, and more on the way. I believe DOE with the DC SCU has about 200 community solar installations at this point. So we're very happy about that. Our outreach team is actively enrolling subscribers and is available for anyone that's listening to do presentations, events, tabling, canvassing, and any other outreach activities I think that you can think of. Next. So last, if you don't qualify for Solar for All, I think we'll have some other presenters that'll get into more detail on these. But we have a cool solar tool on our website. It's called Mapwell. You can go there. You can see quickly what your roof may be able to hold as far as solar capacity. Contact some installers, get some assessments and quotes, decide whether you want to own or lease it. You can explore local bulk purchase options, and then install solar and reap the benefits. Wonderful thing. Next, I think that's it for me. Um, Here's our website for our variety of solar initiatives. If you have questions about this project or others, let me know. I think we'll have questions at the end or
Thank you,
going
Emil.
now.
That is a great project, and I can't wait to see it myself, actually. And maybe
Cool.
when we get back to normal, we can actually, maybe our next event will be a field trip there, and you can show us in person.
That's
Uh,
right.
and if the audience has questions for Emil, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll go to our next presenter, Yesenia.
Thanks, Jamie. My name is Yesenia Rivera. I am the Director of Energy Equity and Inclusion for Solar United Neighbors. We're a DC-based nonprofit that helps folks go solar. So today I'm going to talk about financial incentives and resources available to district residents, as well as technical resources for those looking to go solar. But before I start talking about the financial resources, I want to set the stage by talking about our renewable portfolio standard that Jamie and Emil mentioned earlier, and the solar renewable energy credits, because these two things have an impact on those financial resources and why it's so valuable for DC residents to go solar. Now, like Jamie said, DC has one of the most ambitious renewable portfolio standards, or RPS for short, which means that by 2032, 100% of the district energy has to come from clean energy resources or renewable energy. And 10% of that has to be from local solar. And the reason for that local solar is that it creates a market, it creates incentives, but it also creates jobs inside the district. And that was the biggest push behind that 10% carve out, was we wanted district benefits, district businesses and residents to benefit from going green. So the 10% carve out is a little different than the RPS. The 10% carve out is by 2041. So every year it escalates a little bit. What do these two things mean? In combination, that RPS and that solar carve out create a market, and it helps consumers go solar. It helps pay off for that solar energy system. Why? Because there's a fine associated with this solar carve out. If the utilities fail to meet that percentage, and showing that whatever percentage we are at the moment, 10% by 2041 comes from solar that's generated inside the district, they have to pay a fine. That fine right now is $500 per every megawatt hour they fall short. Now, we all know that the utilities don't have solar farms. It's like we've mentioned, space in DC is limited. So what do the utilities do? The utilities go to solar homeowners and solar businesses and buy these credits from them to show the district that a percentage of the energy consumed inside DC comes from local solar. Because that SRAC, that fine is $500 per megawatt, that means that every system that's installed in this district that generates these SRACs gets quite an amount for these credits. Right now, that SRAC cost is about $425 a credit, which is the highest in the country. Compared to Maryland, it's $77 a credit. So how many credits do I get if I go solar? That depends on the size of your system. For example, I have a 7.5 kilowatt system. It generates about 9 solar renewable energy credits a year. What does that mean? If I were in DC, I would be seeing about $4,000, close to $4,000 a year in SRAC income. But unfortunately for me, I live on the Maryland side of the border, which means that my system only generates about $425 a year. So that's like a 10-time difference. If you're in DC and you're able to buy your system and go solar that way, it pays off. That is like the biggest incentive for DC homeowners and local businesses to go solar. That is not the only incentive. We also have federal tax credits. If you own the system and you install it, let's say this year or next year, that federal tax credit is 26% off whatever the system costs. Let's say you install a $10,000 system. You do it by December 31st of this year. When you file your taxes for next year, you can ask for a credit of $2,600 back in your taxes. Now, the catch is that credit is not refundable. So if you do not owe taxes, you don't get that credit back. Unfortunately, you have to have a tax burden or tax appetite in order to access that credit. But between the SRACs and the tax credit means that it is very valuable and very easy for DC residents to go solar. And instead of paying off your system 10, 12 years down the line, a DC resident that owns their system pays it off in 5 years because of the SRACs and the tax credit. Now, I know Emil talked a lot about solar for all. And honestly, I've worked, I started in Sun as the DC solar director. And my job at the time was implementing Sun's Solar for All grant. So I've worked closely with DOE, I've worked closely on the Solar for All program, and it is the envy of the rest of the country. When we're talking about low-income solar, when we're talking about energy equity, Solar for All always comes up, which is why many of us activists here in the district are bound to make this work because everyone else is looking at us when it comes to low-income solar. And the goal, like Emil said, is to help 100,000 low-income families go solar at no cost to them. So if you're low to moderate income and you can't afford to install your system, the finances are not there for you, you can take advantage of DC Solar for All program. And I urge you to look into it. It doesn't matter if you're a homeowner or if you're a tenant, you can take advantage of Solar for All. That's why we have projects like Oxon Hill Run that create community solar. You can still take that 50% credit off your bill, even if you don't own your house or you're renting or your roof is not good enough. So there are many options and many ways to finance these systems. The federal tax credit and the SRACs are only available if you actually own the system. Unfortunately, if you are leasing your system, somebody else owns that solar system, you don't have access to those SRACs and that tax credit. So keep that in mind. I know this all sounds like a lot, and it can be really scary when you're looking at going solar, but the district has a lot of technical resources available for its residents. For example, like I said, I work for Solar United Neighbors. We are a nonprofit. We are installer neutral. And our mission is to help educate folks that are thinking about going solar. Like we have a lot of resources on our website that will walk you through what is the technology, what goes on my roof, how does it work, how do I know that my roof is good enough to go solar, what do I have to keep in mind when I'm going solar, how much does it cost, how can I finance these? These are all questions we've heard many times before. And like I said, we have webinars on our website. We have frequently asked questions. We can walk you through the SRACs, the local incentives, even the tax credits, so you have a better understanding. And by the time you make that decision, you have all the information available to you, so you can make a decision that works for you and your family. We also have a helpline. So if folks want to go solar, don't know where to start, or have talked to installers and have all these proposals and they all look great to you, they're all speaking in different languages, you can call our helpline. It's free. and we will walk you through those proposals. We'll help you break them down so you're actually comparing apples to apples, because every installer has a different way of presenting the information. So what our help desk does is it breaks it all down so you can actually compare them and see which one of those proposals is best for you. And I'm talking about plural for the proposals because one of the things we really suggest is that if you're deciding to go solar, if you really want to go solar, talk to more than one installer. That is key. You don't want to just go with the first installer you talk to. It may not be the best option for you. It may not be the most financially lucrative deal for you. So talk to several installers, get different quotes. And if you need help ranking them down, we're here. I'll put my website on the chat board after I'm done, so you know where to go. The Office of People's Counsel also has a guide for solar homeowners and businesses looking to go solar that talks about everything I just went through, like whether you lease, whether you own, how to make decisions, what makes a good roof for going solar. And again, it's another neutral source for you all to take advantage of and not just hear it from the installers who at the end of the day have a motive, which is getting you to buy that system. So if you're looking for neutral parties, you can come to Sun, you can come to OPC, and we will give you the information as is without bias. The district's DOE also has a guide on financing solar. So if you're wondering, how do I pay for this? DOE has resources as well. And I think either Jamie or one of the DOE folks will put it in the chat. But just to wrap it up, there is help. There's many ways of going solar. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Yesenia. That is the clear takeaway for me there is if you live in DC or even if you rent in DC, you should go solar, and that there's a lot of resources available to you to help you get there. And I know your organization has some, and Jen at the end will talk about some of the things DOEE offers. And, you know, you can always just call or email us and ask us, and we can help you. So with that, we're going to transition to what the future of solar looks like. Unfortunately, we have some experts who wrote the report on that, so I will turn it over to Aaron and Ben.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Jen. It's really lovely to be here, and thanks to DOE for inviting us to join this panel. Can you all hear me? Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's just make sure the technology works. I'm going to wait for a head nod that you can see.
It's loading. It's getting there. It's looking good.
All right. Fantastic. Well, again, lovely to be here. My name is Erin Camp. I'm a senior associate with Synapse Energy Economics. We're based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I'm here with my colleague, Ben Habamaki. And we are here to talk about a report that we wrote on behalf of the Office of the People's Counsel, starting in 2018, and the report was published in 2020, early 2020. So the report was titled Future of Solar PV in the District of Columbia, Feasibility, Projections, and Rate Impacts of the District's Expanded RPS. Just a brief background about our organization. We are founded in 1996. We are a relatively small consulting research and analysis company focusing in energy and environmental economics. We often have clients like the DC OPC, including consumer advocates and environmental advocates. And we had previously worked for OPC on a number of related topics, including looking at distributed solar potential and value and policy options for the district. So we brought a pretty strong background in the DC area, focusing on solar issues. Now, the key question, there are many key questions of this particular report, including the feasibility of the expanded RPS, both in terms of the full renewable energy RPS as well as the solar carve-out. The report also discussed solar potentials of varying types of solar, including rooftop, parking lots, and ground mount solar. We also examined the potential for community solar across the district and looked at the potential rate and bill impacts of DC electric customers. Now that's a lot of stuff to talk about in a short amount of time, so we decided to trim it down to these key topics for today's discussion. The first one is answering the question, can the district achieve the new RPS? And today we're going to focus on the solar carve-out. 2, how might solar development play out across the district's wards? And 3, how can policymakers support solar development in DC while also promoting equity under the RPS? And so we're going to dive in, and I'm going to let my colleague Ben kick us off with helping us answer the question, can the district achieve the new solar carve-out?
All right, thank you, Erin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can.
Great. So sort of just to set the table here with some context, this graph shows the history of RPS laws in the district, starting with the 2004 Act and continuing with the 2011 Act, the 2016 Act, and finally the most recent Omnibus Act. And as is I think very clear from this graphic, the story is of a succession of increasingly ambitious goals for the district. And so Yesenia did a really nice job of describing kind of the nuts and bolts of the 2018 Act, and importantly how the SREC functions as a spur to investment in solar in the district. So I won't go into too much detail about that. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, despite having very noble and ambitious goals for solar development in the district, the history of solar development so far has been short of the RPS's legislated requirements. So the red dashed line that we see here, which is sort of a funny upward sloping shape, shows the annual total cumulative solar capacity required for the district. And if we look at 2021, which is obviously the current year and the year for which the most recent data is available, we see that the total capacity of solar that counts towards this carve-out requirement is about 117 megawatts. And Synapse calculated that the capacity required to generate enough SRECs so that the district suppliers can meet their statutory requirements is considerably higher, on the order of 160 megawatts. So unfortunately, the story up to this point has been of a kind of persistent shortfall, which given how rich the SREC markets are, how much revenue a residential or commercial customer can reap from selling SRECs, this is a bit of a disconnect. It's a kind of a surprising outcome. Of course, there's a lot of reasons for it. We'll explore them in a little bit more detail going forward. So next slide, please. So as Erin mentioned, one of our main research questions was whether the district could feasibly achieve its ambitious 2018 solar carve-out goals. And to help us try to get a handle on this, we formulated 3 projections to provide kind of a high and low boundaries for potential future development and a middle path. And I'll talk about these in more detail, but just at a high level, the low projection represents sort of a business as usual course. As I mentioned before, the district has not achieved its legislated solar carve-out requirements thus far. And in the low projection, it continues to fall short. Importantly, that means, or sort of an implication of that, is that the SREC mechanism is not sufficient to spur the necessary investment in solar. The middle projection shows the SREC mechanism ultimately working. So in this projection, we see the district come into compliance with the law in 2024 and continue in compliance through 2037. And finally, to provide sort of an upward bound, we calculated a high projection, which is based on our analysis using GIS and some other tools. The maximum solar that we believe could be installed through 2041, given both the historical trends and kind of the technical constraints. You know, there's only so many rooftops, there's only so much land area. A key takeaway from this analysis, which I'll discuss in a little more detail in the next slides, is that based on our experience so far, or the district's experience so far, and the projections that we generated, we conclude that it's not likely for the district to achieve its 10% goal by 2041 without some additional policy supports or other interventions. So next slide, please. So I won't speak at length about these. I'll just kind of cover them very quickly. As I mentioned before, the low scenario is a continuation of the status quo. One caveat that I have to provide here is that the status quo is a 2019 status quo when we completed our analysis. So you can see that the projection, which is this solid black line, is below the legislated requirement, which is the dashed red line, through the end of the RPS term, as it has been since 2009 or 2010. This is a kind of pessimistic, conservative projection based on 2018 incremental growth. It certainly is a low bound. We know that the district can install 14 megawatts of solar a year because it's done it, and it's actually even done better since. And we don't put this forward as the most likely outcome, but sort of the worst case, the most kind of anemic growth that we can expect given the factors in play. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, the middle scenario is one in which the RPS and its critical SREC mechanism, which is supported by the alternative compliance payments that Yesenia mentioned, that suppliers must pay if they fail to secure enough SRECs. Well, in the middle scenario, the SREC market and the revenues that it represents for homeowners and businesses are sufficient to bring the district into compliance. Of course, it doesn't happen immediately. There is a considerable lag up to the current point, and so convergence doesn't happen until 2024 in this scenario. And if you look toward the later period, we do project that the district falls out of compliance. And the main reason for that is because of the legislated step down in the ACP level, which in turn reduces the expected value of SRECs. We base our curve on the payback periods that I won't go into too much detail, but there have been great analyses of the relationship between the payback period and adoption by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, so we adapted that. Finally, our high scenario, as I mentioned before, represents sort of the best case, not something that we expect to play out. We're not standing here and saying that we expect that there will be in excess of 1,200 megawatts of solar in the district in 2041. But there is the roof space and the ground space and the parking lot canopy space. And I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Ben. All right, so thanks for that overview of the three scenarios and the likelihood of DC needing to carve out. Now I'm going to chat a little bit about how might the district's deployment of solar look across each of its individual wards. Now we looked at the historical installation of solar across DC's wards for a few important reasons. One is that given the limited area for solar development in DC, it's critically important that the district take advantage of as much area as possible that's available, and that includes area across all 8 wards. And the other reason is that equity principles require that all district residents are able to reap the benefits of distributed solar. So if you compare the technical potential of solar in each of DC's wards and compare that to how solar has been deployed thus far, you can take a look at where solar installations are lagging. And with that information, you can start to do targeted outreach and community planning, trying to understand if there are any ward-specific barriers to deployment of solar, and also potentially using these results to identify good places for future solar for all installations. And as Ben mentioned, we did a geographic analysis using GIS software to map out map out and calculate the total technical potential for solar in each of DC's 8 wards. And that's what you see on the left-hand side here. And it should jump out to you right away that Ward 5 has the highest technical potential for solar across all of DC with almost 19% share. Conversely, Ward 1, which of course is the smallest ward, only has about 6% of the district's technical potential for solar. On the flip side, when you look at where has solar already been installed, that's what the right-hand image shows. Right away, you should notice that Ward 2 is lagging in terms of its current solar installations relative to how much space they have for solar. On the flip side, Ward 7 is actually doing really well and has installed more than its technical potential share relative to the other wards. Ward 2, 3, and 5 are the ones that are currently lagging. So those would be great examples of places where Solar for All could do some targeted installations to help bridge the gap, the equity gap. And now we're going to present some of our key policy recommendations based on some of the things that we have shared with you today. And those are fourfold. The first is, as Ben was alluding to, consider modifying the ACP in the later years of the RPS requirement. The second one is identify hosting capacity constraints and do some collaboration with PEPCO, implement solar supportive building codes, and finally monitor the solar adoption across the wards over time and conduct targeted outreach. So we're going to discuss each of these in a little bit more detail, and I'm going to pass it over to Ben at this point to discuss the first two.
Sure, thank you, Erin. So this is just building on the discussion about the middle projection before. We forecast that even if the RPS and the SREC mechanism work as designed, and there aren't other major impediments that stand in the way of PV development in the district. Because of the way that the 2018 law is written, the SREC price level may not be adequate to support the needed investment in solar in the out years, in the later years of this scenario. And so we encourage policymakers and lawmakers to consider modifying the legislated ACP level in the later years. Of course, this isn't the only variable that impacts how much solar gets built in the district. Not even close, but it's important that it's important that the ACP be high enough, nonetheless. And importantly, the ACP isn't indexed to inflation. Of course, there are other economic variables that will surely change over time. So, it's important to take a broad view, not just to focus on the ACP, but to remember that that is a key input that can be potentially manipulated to deliver the desired results. Aaron, should I speak to this one as well? Oh, sorry. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, happy to take this one, Ben. So one thing we haven't discussed in great depth today is the issue of hosting capacity constraints. And this is actually quite an important consideration if the district is going to meet its solar carve-out. Hosting capacity constraints will likely continue to be a barrier over time, and it will need to be considered on a constant basis going out to 2041. Our report does identify that there are already some hosting capacity constraints. Some of them are worse based on the specific ward, and therefore our report recommends that DC work with PEPCO to undergo a thorough hosting capacity analysis for the district. And since then, since we published the report, the DC Commission has actually required that PEPCO update its hosting capacity maps on a monthly basis. We do know that there may still be room for improvement in the data quality of the PEPCO hosting capacity maps and the frequency of the updates. But there has certainly been some progress on this front, but there will certainly be more work that will need to be done regarding this important barrier. The next policy recommendation from our report is solar supportive building codes. And this policy would require the installation of solar PV for any new construction, as well as potentially on any substantial renovation on existing buildings. One of the most well-known examples of this type of policy is in California, which does require solar to be installed on any new construction. And that was passed just a couple of years ago. The consequences of this policy would likely help to accelerate the carve-out compliance, with the added caveat that there could be some added complexity and upfront cost of construction, of course, with requiring solar panels. So that may actually, in turn, reduce the pace of new construction. But we still do expect that it would accelerate the carve-out compliance. And finally, there could be a strong correlation between the new solar that is developed as a result of this type of policy with where there is the strongest economic activity. So wards that would otherwise or would normally see a lot of new construction would therefore see the most solar. So there's an important interplay between this sort of policy and a more equity-focused policy that aims to make sure that the distribution of new solar is widespread, which gets to my last slide here. As we discussed, some solar adoption is currently lagging in some wards, and in order for the district to meet its ambitious solar carve-out, we're going to need to see solar installed equal to the technical potential across the entire geography of the district. That's going to be critically important. And furthermore, if the district is looking towards that gap between where the technical potential is and where solar has historically been installed, DC can will not only increase its likelihood of meeting the carve out, but can also address the equity gaps. As I discussed earlier, targeting the lagging wards with solar for all installations would be a great way to not only improve equity and access to solar across the district, but would also increase the likelihood of the district meeting its solar carve out. And that brings me to the last slide, and I'm happy to answer questions, as has been at the end of the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a great eye-opening report. So with that, I will turn it over to our final panelists, Jay Lurie from the Green Bank, to talk about well, how you're going to pay for some of these and also some of the innovative things they're thinking about. Jay?
Thanks, Jamie. I just want to make sure, is my screen being shared right now?
Yep, looking good.
Excellent. Okay. So as Jamie said, I'm Chief Investment Officer of DC Green Bank. My name is Jay Lurie. I joined our new and growing organization about 4.5 months ago. And actually we were, just a little bit of background on our story. We were put into legislation in 2018 by under the leadership of Mayor Bowser and the City Council. And really, green banks in general and DC specifically are meant to be investment engines to align with climate policy. And so as Yesenia and several other speakers mentioned today, DC has very ambitious targets for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and of course, renewable energy. And so DC Green Bank was set up to really help crowd in private capital to reach those targets. And so we're meant to be a complement to existing institutions, financial sponsors, developers, et cetera, to address financing gaps and really to also address information gaps in the city and try to achieve our other mandate aside from climate targets, which goes alongside it, is addressing the equity gap. And several of the speakers have already discussed that, including our last presentation from Synapse. And some of that addressing the gap is really through information initially, and then investment. So just to go a step further on our mission and our vision, and so we really want to see in the end a thriving clean economy for everyone in DC, and our core values are really threefold that accomplish our mission of providing access to capital, grow the clean economy, and develop a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable DC. So inclusive prosperity is again that equity component. We've already heard that growing the clean economy can actually be a good business, and we want to make sure that business affects all stakeholders in DC, and really especially helps address the equity gap. Clean economy. This is not only an environmental effort. This is really a jobs effort. So and you'll hear that. I think you've already heard it from the new administration, the Biden administration, on talks of a clean energy accelerator or national climate bank. This is really meant to be jobs focus, in addition to environmental, and finally sustainability. Again, achieving our goals. So we have several sector focus areas. I'm not going to go deep into all of them because I think the topic of this discussion is really on solar. In addition to solar, we are focused on stormwater resilience, which in an urban environment like the district has major environmental impacts. Green buildings account for more than half of the emissions in the district. So this is certainly low-hanging fruit, and we really we have a couple programs already to address green buildings and provide upfront financing for property owners and small business owners, and finally clean transport, so fleet electrification, adoption of electric vehicles, and then the associated charging infrastructure. On solar, we have already, and I'll get to it in a moment, we've already done construction financing for a series of projects being put together by a developer this past year. We are also looking to provide financing at the operation stage, so term. And really, we've noticed that there is a gap at the early stage development, not only for solar, but for most of the sectors we look at. And we're trying to assess how we engage and really fill that gap to allow for more projects to reach the stage where there is access to capital. And so we really want to be playing across the spectrum in terms of the types of projects, looking at single projects, community solar, that was already discussed, of course, through Emil's presentation and also through the others. And then just thinking about how we bank the solar renewable energy certificate market, which was discussed earlier, and really provides a way to have a return for both the investor and the lender. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Solar for All 2020, and we already heard a bit about the Solar for All program, which in this case was providing for free energy to low-income customers. We provided financing to one developer this past year in our first year of operations. So we all kind of joined in 2020, and this is the first real project that we provided capital to. Series of 8 sites, mostly in Ward 7 and 8, also Ward 4. And this is really, I think, a good case study of how we can intervene in the market. So Solar for All, for developers to be able to get the incentive from the Department of Energy and Environment through the DC's Sustainable Energy Utility, there's a strict timeline to achieve milestones. And if a developer, if there's any delay on getting financing lined up, that can really affect the ability for the developer to achieve the milestones and hence make the project happen. Of course, during the pandemic this past year, some of the planned financing resources were put on hold. And so the developer flywheel was in a bit of a bind, and we really helped to get those projects forward. And these are construction loans. So we have 28 full-time equivalent jobs. I mentioned earlier, this is definitely not just environmental, but this is a jobs. This is a job subject, and those projects created a series of construction full-time jobs, which should be transferable as we continue growing the solar sector. So one thing I want to talk about briefly, in addition to the Solar for All, and I did see some comment coming in, which I've not looked at, but I can get to it in Q&A. One thing that we are looking at, and this is in response to some of the points made earlier about the SREC market, and I guess it's something to be mindful of, that the developers and the long-term investors that are playing in this space, they have existing exposure to the solar renewable energy certificate market, so they're interested in investing in projects, but also ensuring that price stays high. And so, but they also want to build more projects. So there's a bit of a conflict there. We have been talking to some corporate off-takers, so companies, organizations that are large customers of the utility, PEPCO, that through their environmental, social governance policies and through just good business want to procure 100% renewables. And they want to do it in a way that makes a local impact and, again, addresses this inclusive prosperity component of bringing sort of the community stakeholders to the table and really allowing them to benefit. So what we were thinking, and we've been exploring such an initiative, is bringing together these these customers that would like to procure a renewable energy for a long term, and then developers and operators to agree to a bundled approach of energy and SRECs. So we've been looking into such an approach, and we think that this could really have a few benefits to complement all of the work that's going on in the more traditional development and financing of solar projects. So, this is again a way to support growth in the market, increased jobs, increased revenue potential for property owners, which includes nonprofits and affordable housing sites, ramping up the community renewable energy facility program. And this was spoken about earlier in the presentations. And one thing I mentioned earlier, ability to achieve climate impact without necessarily impacting that curve that the Synapse team presented of the expected SREC prices. Because if an energy buyer actually is also buying those certificates, they're not being sold into the market, and they, in theory, in effect, should not be affecting the renewable portfolio standard. And so this is something we're exploring. It's early stage, but I wanted to put it out there because some of the audience members may be on either side of that equation, and we would love to have further conversations and serve as not only a financier but really a bridge to innovate. So with that, I'm gonna close my session. This is some info here: phone number and email address, and you can find our website dcgreenbank.org. And happy to, Jamie, as you see fit, happy to address any questions. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet.
Thanks, Jay. That was a great presentation. And I know you guys are helping people procure solar, but it's great to see you're doing some really innovative thinking too on how we can actually continue to scale up our solar, which is going to be critical to meet our climate goals. But I think what we'll do now is we do have some questions coming in that I would encourage our panelists to look like, but I will turn it over to my colleague, Jen, to lead the question and answer discussion.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists. I know that one of our members needs to jump off here really shortly. So the first question that came in was for Yesenia for DC Sun. So the audience really appreciated all the information on the benefits and tax credits for single family solar. Does DC Sun have any resources for community solar for those renters in the district?
Actually, we do. We have a website. It's I'll put it in the chat box, but it's a very consumer-friendly website that lets you understand what community solar is, answers any questions you may have on it, but also lets you look up what projects are available in your area. So if there's any project that's open, you can actually start the process to sign up for them through that website. And I'll put it in the chat for anybody that needs it. I'll also add our DC team address, our email address. So if you have any other questions, feel free to send them to the DC team and we will make sure to answer them all. Fortunately, I do have to run. I have another meeting right after this, but thank you all for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yesenia. Okay, so we have had some questions going back and forth in the chat, and I do see some of our panelists have addressed those. But I think it might be helpful just to bring it up for everybody on the call here. So one of the first questions was for our Synapse team. Is your conclusion about district falling out of compliance speculative? There could be other reasons solar is not being installed beyond the SREC prices. Ben or
Sure.
Aaron? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, I think that's a very good observation, and the middle scenario shouldn't shouldn't be taken to suggest that as long as we get the SREC price right, all the other pieces will fall into place. And certainly, the experience so far doesn't support that. I think the best way to view the middle projection is, sort of answering the question of whether the SREC and the ACP that supports it are likely to be sufficient, all else equal. Our finding is that it isn't.
Great, thank you, Ben. And then another question came in from constituent regarding their condo building trying to go solar, and I do see that there's some correspondence going back and forth. Zach, do you feel like you have enough information to kind of follow up with our team afterwards, or would it be helpful to talk through this now?
I'd be happy to follow up afterwards. That'll work for me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And then our next question is for our DOEE colleague, Emil, regarding Oxen Run. So they thank you for the presentation. And is there any plans, or is battery storage going to be taken into consideration for this CREF site?
All right, that's a great question. So battery storage is not incorporated at the present time, but the system was designed to be able to add that with the kind of minimal cost and difficulty in the future if the time comes. So we are exploring some of those options right now as well.
Awesome. And our next question is for you, Jay, for DC Green Bank. Does the DC Green Bank handle any property assessed clean energy financing, PACE financing in the district?
Yes, thanks, Jen. And thanks for the question, Eric. I did respond in the chat, but just to clarify, so currently DC PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, is under the Department of Energy and Environment. It is under our statute to be the administrator of PACE, and so that transition is happening now. There are, and I do say administrator because there are a series of PACE lenders that would provide the capital, but we would administer. And that is one way of achieving upfront financing for clean energy or energy efficiency investments for property owners. And so that is something for sure. We have other programs as well that provide upfront financing through either our balance sheet or partner lender's balance sheet. And that's more of like a senior loan approach. Whereas PACE is more of you're basically paying back through a tax assessment every year. But happy to discuss that further offline, and I'll put the email address for DC Green Bank in here so people can reach out if they need to.
Okay, great. And the next question that came in is back to you, Emil, regarding Oxen Run. How much did the project cost, and are there similarly large projects affordable with the REDF funds?
So the total project cost is 5.5 million. So that included all of the pre-development work, legal services, equipment, labor, fencing, etc. So that's the all-in development cost for that. And so as far as other large systems, so that one's 2.65 megawatts. There's one larger at Bowling, joint base, that is for base activities. So this is the largest community solar system. There are some other fairly large community solar systems coming online or have recently, but they're more in the kind of megawatt size. And generally we're starting to max those sites out. They tend to happen at carports or canopies over large parking lots, or other situations where there are large expanses of land. But beyond that, there isn't, as was mentioned, a lot of space to build these very large systems.
Great, thank you, Emil. And Iris asked a great question. She was wondering if there's any information on international solar projects. I'm going to leave that open to the panel team, and if not, Iris, we can of course follow up with you after the webinar as well.
Thank you so much for including me. I look forward.
Okay, any folks familiar with any international projects going on?
I mean, I guess I can. I mean, from DC. So this is a question that is near and dear to my heart because I didn't mention the start, but I came over to DC Green Bank from the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group. So all of my projects were then international, and that is certainly one source of financing for projects in developing countries, in addition to several others. DC Green Bank, we are focused on the district and or the DC area. So our sources of capital are meant to kind of to really drive investment in the district. But I'm not sure if the other panelists have any ideas or programs that could help out Iris.
Thank you so much for that information. I do have a project going on. It involves pretty much building a community so that it's sustainable enough for the community to not need so much financial help from the government. So thank you so much for taking it into account. I'll take that into consideration. It's not an idea that I ever thought about. I only thought about fundraising and helping, but I understand. Thank you.
If I could jump in to add, Iris, that's a great concept. Not speaking to the financing part, but solar is booming in many locations around the world, often in places that have really high electricity costs and or costs to connect to the utility grid. And so there are a variety of nonprofits and kind of government partners that have joint partnerships that are helping communities to develop some of those projects. Some are microgrids that are totally off the utility system and are kind of self-contained. We host a lot of international delegations that are interested in kind of figuring out or learning about what we're doing and how they can expand to their own residents. So I don't know if there's a specific single resource that you could go to, but we could probably help you offline. Identify some folks if there are specific countries or jurisdictions that have good models. I think that the folks here someone could help you kind of track down who got that going and maybe get you headed in the right direction.
Thank you so much. I'll email or anything. Either you can get in contact with me or I'll try to get in contact with you as well.
Sure, I'll throw my email in the chat and follow up.
Great, thank you, Iris, and thank you, Emil and Jay. Are there any other questions that we have for our wonderful panelists here today? Oh, looks like we got one more question in. Okay, so this question came in from Seth. Since the district is so small, why is there not emphasis on solar tracking systems and bifacial panels to maximize production per square foot? Single axis trackers get a 30% bump, dualies up to 45% more power, and bifacial panels can get an extra 50% on the backside.
Well, I can just speak to a couple of Solar for All projects that we have did use bifacial modules on rooftop, like kind of commercial office buildings where that kind of additional cost and efficiency hit wouldn't matter so much when it has an amenity value for, say, a rooftop patio for lunch purposes or what have you, or allowing light through for green roofs. As far as trackers, we actually explored that for Oxen Run. It didn't the gains in production counter to the additional maintenance cost or potential maintenance just didn't really pencil out. But you're right, in a lot of applications, I think that they do make sense. And if you have more thoughts on that, be interested in hearing from you. So in a nutshell, it may have something to do with the kind of the financing and the fact that there are other kind of higher costs associated with developing solar in DC, like labor and what have you. So that's one perspective.
Great. Thank you, Emil. And great question, Seth. Okay. Any other questions for our wonderful panelists today? Also, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask verbally as well. All right.
Jen,
Yes.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
We always hear there's not enough space, but then you fly over DC in an airplane and you're looking down and all you see is downtown DC and no solar panels. And so I know, what is going on there? What's the disconnect?
I could jump in to try to answer that. I think it's complicated, but one issue that we sort of touched on in our report is the fact that a lot of buildings in downtown DC are federally owned buildings, and there's a challenge in siting solar on federal buildings because it's federal property. And technically the electricity that's generated from the solar panels would need to serve DC residents. So there's like a jurisdictional issue there that presents an added challenge. I think there may also be some challenges relating to zoning requirements, but I'm not an expert in DC zoning requirements, so I'm not the one to speak to that. But I do know that there's some definite challenges with installing solar in the downtown DC area.
Yeah, to quickly piggyback, everything Aaron says correct. It can be complicated for large, commercial or federal buildings. There are roof warranties at play. People flip buildings, I think, more quickly than they do in some other jurisdictions. So anything that complicates anything that complicates anything is often a challenge when it's not particularly lucrative on a commercial office building to do that may be 10 stories and can only do the amount of solar capacity that might supply 2 or 3 homes. So it's just not worth the headache often. And then again, it complicates the sale potentially. I think we have more opportunities is low-rise buildings, to the extent that they're being held on for a long time. Campuses that have a stable property owner that's in it for the long term. That type of thing is where you get, I think, a lot of the scale.
And if I can just compliment, I think their speakers have identified some of the constraints, and just I see that Alex Lopez also asked a question in the chat. So I think federal properties are certainly an opportunity. That's a lot of real estate space in the district. Not only buildings, but also reservoirs, if we think about potential for floating solar. So the 2 main reservoirs in DC are operated by the Army Corps of Engineers. Those are really large facilities. But there's also district agencies, district operators of infrastructure services like WMATA, DC Water, et cetera, that have really large facilities where there is significant opportunity, and I think they are actively exploring. And actually, DC Water, I think, is about to launch the first phase of a solar project. So, so I think there's definitely movement on that side, but federal properties is certainly an area to explore further.
Great. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Jay. And thank you, Aaron. So it looks like our last and final question comes from Seth. How do prefs get started? It sounds like there are a lot of sad condo owners like me and Zach and Ward 2 with difficult roofs or neighbors who would subscribe if there was a project open. So something I just want to note here, Seth, DC Sun does have a list of community solar projects that are open for subscribers. We'll be sure to drop that link in. Also, something to note with community solar, in order for there to be a connection, there is a minimum of 2 subscribers. So I'm wondering, Seth, if this would be an opportunity to follow up with our team individually to see if there's, some solutions that we can propose and think through. And open to other panel members to add as well. Okay, wonderful. Well, before I pass it back over to Jamie, I just wanted to highlight some other solar initiatives that DOEE is pursuing. So we have a solar seminar series that's going to be launching Thursday, February 25th at 1 p.m. The series is going to have a host of 5 events, with each event focusing on a different component of going solar. So the first event on February will be covering what steps you need to take before going solar. And then the other events will cover information on SRECs. I know that Yesenia provided a wonderful summary, solar contracting, as well as community solar. So I'm going to drop the link for that registration information right here. And then Yesenia also mentioned that DOEE had published a finance guide. So I just wanted to mention that really quickly. We have a district solar financing consumer guide that we worked with the Clean Energy States Alliance to publish. And it's really helpful. It has some contracting language in there, like what are escalators? What items do I need to look for before signing? It also goes through the local and federal benefits as well. So something to keep in mind as you're going solar. And I'm also going to be entering my contact information in as well. If there's other information that you would like DOEE to focus on or present, we're always open to feedback there. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jamie to wrap it up.
Thank you, Jen. And I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for taking your time and for the audience for joining us. I know solar sometimes, if you're not accustomed to it, there's a lot of RPS, CREF, SREC terminology. So hopefully you learned some stuff today. And as Jen said, we're a resource. Lastly, I hope you'll join us in a month from now on March 10th when we have our next Green Building Seminar series, which will look at how you finance building retrofits. It's going to be another good event, I hope. So please register and join us there. I'll post this recording on our Eventbrite page along with the presentations. And so thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.